Hello, everybody. Charlie and Linda Bloom are here with you again today.
Hello.
Glad to be with you. We have some surprise findings. These are pieces of research that blow up the myth that when you're with a committed partner, either married or cohabitating in a long-term partnership, that the sex is going to get boring and that the relationship is going to get stale. And there's popular belief out there that the singles are the ones that are having all the really juicy sex. But that's a popular misconception. I myself was under that belief before I read the research myself. And I thought that maybe the media, the TV and movies that were doing this hot, steamy stuff among the singles was the norm, and that the old married couples, well, they weren't having as good a time in bed. But the research totally blows it up. And it may surprise you to find out that the people who are doing this research have some thousands of people reporting to them. Do you know that there's a Center for Sexual Health Promotion? And it's in Indiana at the university. And they interviewed people between 14 years old and 94, a little less than 6,000 people, to find out how great the sex was. And what they're finding is that of the singles who say that they had sex 2 or 3 times a week, it was only 5%. When they asked the marrieds in the same age groups, they were having sex 2 or 3 times a week 25% of the time. So it's 5 times more for the marrieds than for the singles. So I also want to tell you that that very same organization in Indiana, the Center for Sexual Health Promotion, when they asked how many people didn't have any sex within the last year, 61% of the singles said that they didn't have sex even one time in the whole year, which I think is kind of crying shame. But only 18% of the people who were married said that they hadn't had sex in the last year. It's okay if both people say that they don't want to have sex, but often of that 18%, one person would still like it, but the other person's will is prevailing. So to be without something that is such an incredible gift for nature and is such a bonding experience for the couple, it seems a shame to go without it. But at least the long-term partnered couples are doing better than the singles.
So maybe we ought to talk about exactly why that is, because it seems sort of counterintuitive. After all, there are some very compelling reasons for wanting to experiment and experience being with new partners. It is more kind of exciting than the same old tried and true, or at least it's hard for me to remember back that far, but I seem to remember that there was that element of excitement and surprise with the novelty of a new partner.
There's also a fair amount of anxiety that comes with the excitement.
Yeah, and that's really one of the reasons why some of these people, a lot of these people, perhaps the majority of the people who have been married that have been interviewed, describe being sexual as being in some ways more pleasurable than it was when they were out there in the field more. That there's a feeling of familiarity, a feeling of comfort, a feeling of trust. All of these things are important in the sexual experience. It's not just about having the right technique. that can be really helpful. But one of the things that really enhances the quality of the experience is the feeling of safety,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of comfort, the feeling of trust, of being able to relax and knowing, and hopefully if you have a well-developed relationship with your partner, that you can experiment, you can try new things. You don't have to be afraid of, you don't have to be so concerned about offending them or displeasing them, because you've already had enough communication with each other, verbally and non-verbally, to kind of have a sense of trust that there's a spirit of goodwill here that has been established over the months or years or decades that we've been together.
So I have the short version of that when you're together for a long-term period of time, you've had a number of conversations, hopefully good communication about what turns you on and what lights you up and what turns you off and what doesn't light you up. And so I say that's ironing out the kinks.
So to speak.
It's ironing out the kinks so you can welcome in a bit of kink. Do you know, when the trust is good, you can be experimental, because everybody has fantasies. And when you have a trusting partnership, you can bring some of those kind of secret fantasies out and maybe play with some of those, which is really enlivening to a relationship. And people who are new in a relationship may be really cautious of bringing out some of their kinky ideas about what would light them up. I don't want to underestimate the convenience factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the long-term, couples, they're right there. They're right there in bed with you. They're right there to reach over and put your hand on the inside of their thigh and give them a cue. And you don't have the inconvenience of surfing the web and going through the emails on the dating sites and narrowing it down and meeting them for coffee and then getting to know them and investing all of that time and effort. There's a tremendous amount of convenience in just having your tried and true there with you as your regular companion, and you can give them the cues that you're interested. Just a little wink at dinner might be your cue that, hey, let's skip dessert and let's get right in bed and let's practice our more sex weight loss plan. And let's have a great time in bed, and it's better than a hot fudge sundae. And so people have their little ways of giving each other the idea, the pat on the butt or the little words. Oh, I think it's time for us to have a date, or whatever your cueing is. And that convenience factor and that cueing, I think, really, so to speak, slicks the way to have more enjoyable sex.
And safer sex too.
Mm-hmm.
Because that feeling of familiarity, of comfort, of security, of safety, that is really important. Because to the degree that you've got that you're feeling physically safe with the other person, that is, that you're not worried about, sexually transmitted diseases, that you don't have to really worry about having to use condoms, that there's a lot of factors that enable you to feel like you can really relax into your body and into each other's bodies without being concerned about that. And then there's the emotional safety, the feeling that we can trust each other to not do or say something that's going to be emotionally hurtful. I mean, not that there's a guarantee that you're never going to get your feelings hurt if you're experimenting, but that we know that we can deal with that honestly and directly if there is a line that's crossed, and we're not spending so much time in the mental state of evaluating, how am I doing? How is she responding? How is he feeling about this? We're not really needing to put a lot of energy in that, because we've already gone through that, and we can really surrender to the moment where we're not concerned about anticipating what their feelings might be. We're not worried about whether we're doing something hurtful or upsetting, whether there are needs that we have that are not being met. Because when we've been together for a long time, we do get to know each other's sensitivities. We get to know the places and the kinds of contact that they experience as pleasurable. We've got that information. Now, there is a potential downside, and that is that we can get so comfortable in the familiar, we can get complacent and we can routinize, make it more routine sex. And that's something that we want to be mindful about trying to avoid. And the way we prevent that from happening, the way you avoid that is
that you tell the truth about it if it's getting a little dull and boring, and take responsibility, first telling yourself the truth, and take responsibility for bringing your complaint to your partner and see if you can jazz it up some. Because there might be something in the way. There may be some resentment in the way. There may be some fear in the way.
That's right.
There may be some anxiety in the way. There may be something unrelated to the sex that's incomplete. And you want to keep that channel really open so the sexual experience can really flow.
And you want to do all that without making it the other person's problem, or without blaming them or making it their fault. Like, well, you never do this, or, I wish that you would be more this way. Not that there's anything wrong with expressing a preference or a desire for the other person, but to do it in a non-blaming way, because we're so vulnerable when it comes to sexuality. We're very vulnerable to feeling. Our feelings we're more sensitized to anything that can even remotely feel like judgment or criticism. So we want to express our desires in more responsible and even positive ways. Like, rather than saying, well, you're doing this wrong, or giving them the message that they are failing to accommodate your needs or desires, to really speak more in terms of what it is, your vision of what it is that you would like your relationship to be more filled with. What is it? What's the experience that you want to have more in? What is it that you would be willing to do? What is it to be curious about whether there's something that your partner would like of you that maybe they haven't really made clear yet, but to be more proactive, to be more responsible, and not to express it as a grievance or a grudge, but to be willing to bring up those feelings that might be there. And that keeps things alive. That keeps you in the present moment, rather than feeling like you're kind of just repeating the same old programs.
So I want to underscore what you're saying about that balance point, that sweet spot. I think if the anxiety is too high, it's a big detraction. If the complacency comes with the too much comfort, it can get boring. I think it's a deterrent for the singles that they have to deal with the anxiety of maybe being rejected, and the anxiety that maybe they don't know their partner, what they want, what is going to be pleasurable to them. And so when you get to know your sexual partner better, the anxiety can come down. When you've been with them a long time, you've got another growing edge. That's to keep it vital. That's to keep it, get a little edge of novelty and discovery in there. I'm a big fan of the whole idea that foreplay is everything that went on between the last time we had sex and this time, and that rapport that the couple who has been together for a while can create, the harmony, the camaraderie, the deep friendship, the level of trust being solid. All of this can be so enlivening to the sexual experience, that they argue well, that they negotiate well, that they share responsibility well, that they handle whatever it is that they need to handle well. And then there isn't anything clogging up the channel between the two of them. And the energy that nature blessed us with that's free flowing can really enliven the sexual experience. And you don't necessarily get to have that right at the beginning. You need to grow into it.
Right.
Yeah. I want to do a little bit more with this research. This guy, Roizen, he is very interesting to me. He's a doctor who specializes in the older people. He's at the University of Chicago, and he emphasizes the point that good sex not only feels good, but it really enhances your health. So he does all these inventories. Do you know about how much sex people are having in their older years and what kind of health benefits for getting from that? And he says if you're still having sex twice a week in your older years, your tests for how strong your heart is, how strong your lungs are, for your muscle strength, you're like a person who's 2 years younger than your chronological age, that your heart and respiration and muscle strength and the organs in your body are really enhanced by sexual activity.
Does that mean that the more sex you have, the younger you're going to get, kind of thing?
His claim is that if you're having sex every day, that's going to be your chronological age of your body. Testing is going to be like a person 7 years younger than you. So, maybe he's really onto something here. Now, some people criticize his work and they say, well, of course, the healthier people are going to be more sexually active. And I think that's true. But of course, the sexually active people are probably going to be taking care of their body and working out more. And that's going to enhance their sexual vitality. So I think it's circular. Do you know?
I want to mention something about the research that we did for our second book, The Secrets of Great Marriages, which I think a lot of you have probably read. And in that book, we interviewed over 50 couples who average span of their relationship or being married was 31 years. So these people ranged in age, from like late 40s up to late 80s. And some of them had been married, over 60 years. And one of the things that we found out, and this was kind of a surprise to me, was that they all they all were continuing to be sexual. Although some of the people who were in their late 80s or even early 80s had acknowledged to us that they had modified, they were still sexual, but they had modified it because of physical limitations that they didn't have 50 years ago. But that physical sexual contact continued throughout the length of their relationship to be an important part of it. And there's kind of a myth in our culture that many people still have, that you outgrow the need or the desire for sex. And although there are people, of course, who are no longer sexual beyond a certain point in their life, and with some of them it's because they just have lost the desire, and it's fine with them not to be sexual. And hopefully, if they're married, they and their partner are on the same page, because that can be problematic if one person feels like, well, I'm done with that, that's a chapter in my life that's over, but their partner feels like, well, but I'm not. That can be a challenge to deal with that, with that difference.
And my prediction for those couples that we interviewed for Secrets of Great Relationship who are still highly sexual into their older years, they're going to live longer than the average. And there is research about that, about the couples who are keeping their sexual vitality strong into their later years. My favorite study is the one that's done in Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland, Ireland, and there's 1,000 married men that they studied for 10 years. So the research finding was that these long married men lived 5 years longer than their unmarried counterparts. And they say it's the love cocktail. When we're making love, there's oxytocin, peptides, different hormones, endorphins, dopamine, vasopressin, and nitric oxide. These all lower anxiety, prompt relaxation, and create positive psychology and physiology, which lowers their blood pressure, and they're less apt to have heart attacks and strokes. So this study showed that those men who were having sex 3 times a week had half of the incidence of heart attack and stroke of the men who weren't married.
Mm-hmm.
I got one last study for you, and this is the one about sex and happiness. It's done by researchers in Dartmouth University, David Blackflower, and also a colleague of his named Andrew Oswald at the University of Warwick in England. And they had 16,000 people in their sample. And they administered all of these inventories about how sexually active they were and their level of happiness. And what they found, that when the people in their study increased intercourse from once a month to once a week, that was equivalent to averaging $50,000 a year in their income. They got such a boost in their happiness from picking up the frequency of their sexual contacts. So I think there's a lot of convincing evidence out there about how important it is to prioritize this really beautiful part of our life, that we get happiness, that we get longevity, that we get health benefits. This is not just emotional and psychological. So that if we find a partner that we really want to commit to on the long term, it's a good deal that we make with each other. It's a good contract that we make with each other to keep our sexual vitality up there high on the priority list.
So don't believe any of those rumors that sex can get old or flat or boring with age, or that you outgrow it, that it's natural to outgrow it, the desire for it. And really keep in mind that this is an ongoing co-creative opportunity for you and your partner to cultivate the pleasure and the ability to continually create pleasure in showing and giving and sharing your love with each other through this medium of this incredible gift of sexuality. It's most of us have had the experience of knowing the difference between what it's like to be making love with somebody that you really have a deep emotional connection with, and what that feels like, and how that's different and very distinct from simply having sex with somebody with whom there really isn't any kind of an emotional connection. And, you know, we're not saying that you should never do that, but there is a difference. And we can really do a lot to promote the essential experience of deep connection that really amplifies the pleasure of lovemaking.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to say that I realize that A lot of people aren't like me. I get the biggest kick about going to the research and seeing the percentages and how many people are in the study and what were the findings. And you may not have any interest whatsoever in going to the research to find out what that's saying. But you know what? You may have in your life some wise elders. Maybe some couples are in your family, aunts, uncles, grandparents. Maybe your parents are old enough, who would be happy if you would ask and they would tell you. You may have friends, you may have neighbors, you may have people who aren't so shy. You know, we're well into the 21st century now, and still people are somewhat inhibited about talking about sexuality, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are very happy to tell you their secrets of success. And the wise elders have lived long enough so that they feel this spirit of generativity, that they want to give back. They want to save some trouble for the younger generation. And there may be people in your own network, if you do a little research of your own, who will tell you from their own experience, man, I'm in my 80s and we're still having a pretty hot time. And I'm so glad that they've got these meds available for us. We just hit older age just in time to avail ourselves of them. So there may be people in your life who you value and trust who would be willing to share something that's this personal with you, that would give you hopefulness, like the couples who were much older than us at the time in our research. It was so reassuring that we had plenty of sexual vitality to look forward to in our older years.
And so do you. So take advantage of it.
Okay, we have a couple of announcements for you. One, I so appreciate when you tell your friends who play on Facebook about these talks so that more people can come and see us live or see us afterward in the archives. But now all of the Facebook Lives are up on YouTube. So if you have friends who you think might get a kick out of seeing these, please tell them that it's easy to find it on YouTube, and you go to Linda Charlie Bloom and they'll all be there and you can pick by topic.
Okay, and we are going to be back again, same time, same place, for our talk next week, which is entitled Little Things Are Worth Getting Upset About. Mm-hmm. So tune in then, and we will be happy to enlighten you as to how it is that could be true.
And last but not least, if you've only been playing with us on Facebook and you haven't gotten on our email list, we're going to begin in September to pulse our network and give more tips of the week, guest posts, as well as our newsletter. So you want to be sure to be on our email list, tell your friends, and we are going to give the people who are new and old who join our email list our free ebook called Going for the Gold, which has a lot of hot tips about great relationship, emotional, sexual, conflict management, all the essentials. So we hope to see you next week. I've enjoyed being here with you. Have a great week.
Adios.